Hey folks, back with another video. Let's dive into what stories got my attention today. Starting with the Indonesian police have arrested a man believed to be the military leader of the Jamaah Islamiyah network who has eluded capture since 2003, authorities said on Saturday. Aris Sumarsono, also known as Zulkarnain, was arrested late on Thursday by counter-terrorism police without resistance in a raid at a house in East Lampung district on Sumatra Island, the National Police spokesperson Ahmad Ramadan said. Zulkarnain is suspected of being involved in the making of bombs used in a series of attacks, including the 2002 Bali bombings that killed 202 people, mostly foreign tourists, and a 2003 attack on the JW Marriott Hotel in Jakarta, Indonesia's capital, that killed 12, Ramadan said. Now, Jamaah Islamiyah network is linked to Al-Qaeda. Ramadan said Zulkarnain, a biologist who was among the first Indonesian militants to go to Afghanistan for training, is also accused of harboring Opik Lawanga, another bomb maker and a key Jamaah Islamiyah member. Lawanga was arrested by counter-terrorism police in Lampung last week. He had eluded capture since 2005 after being named as a suspect in an attack that killed more than 20 people at a market in Poso, known as the hotbed of Islamic militancy on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. The Security Council said that Zulkarnain was one of Al-Qaeda's representatives in the Southeast Asia and one of the few people in Indonesia who had had direct contact with the infamous Osama bin Laden's network. Hopefully, the arrest of Zulkarnain will bring justice to the victims of his crime. And broadly, I would urge the other Muslim countries to become more strict on terrorism and start doing more investigations, and also to give a clear message to any future terrorists that they will not be tolerated. Moving on, the Taiwanese authorities on Thursday in Taiwan arrested 3 Taiwanese for allegedly working as agents of the Chinese government, spreading disinformation through social media networks, the Ministry of Justice Investigation Bureau said yesterday. Now, the 3 alleged disseminated claims online that Taiwan and the US were collaborating to support pro-democracy protests in Thailand to destabilize its government, the Bureau said. After an investigation, the Bureau located the suspects based on their IP addresses, and with the help of local police, it on Thursday carried out searches in New Taipei City and Hualien County, it said. 2 of the suspects were identified by their surnames, Liu and Yin, with prosecutors looking to charge the trio with breaches of the National Security Act, it said. Bureau officials said it was the first internet-related national security case it had investigated, which showed that China had expanded its online disinformation efforts, making them more sophisticated and focused on wider swaths of the international community. It is also the first documented case of Beijing successfully recruiting Taiwanese as paid online agents of its quote-unquote cyber army, working to undermine national security and harm Taiwan's international relationships, the Bureau official said. After joining the operation, Liu and Yin allegedly went to China in August last year to receive training before returning late last year, officials in the Bureau's Information and Communication Security Division said. Liu and Yin allegedly worked as administrators on Diba, a Chinese online forum, the Bureau said, adding that it uncovered evidence that since last year, the 2 had carried out Chinese propaganda campaigns targeting Taiwanese by spreading disinformation to sow confusion about the presidential election in January and the pandemic. The 2 allegedly created various accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Line, and other social media platforms used by the Taiwanese to produce and disseminate disinformation, the Bureau official said. Now, I am confident that the Taiwanese will conduct a thorough investigation and will be credible in my opinion, and as far as I know about them. And we will also learn more of how Beijing is trying to undermine the West, and hopefully our government can then counter their measures. I would also urge our governments to be more open about what they do know as to what kind of things the Chinese government is doing. Moving on, the Iranian authorities on Saturday morning executed once exiled dissident journalist Ruhollah Zam over his online work that helped inspire nationwide anti-government protests in the Middle East nation in 2017. The execution took place just months after he returned to Tehran under mysterious circumstances. In June, the court sentenced the 47-year-old Zam to death, saying he had been convicted of, quote, corruption on earth, end quote, a charge often used in cases involving espionage or attempts to overthrow Iran's government. Iran's Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld the death sentence. Zam's website, Ahmad News, and a channel he created on the popular messaging app Telegram had spread the timings of the mass protests and embarrassing information about officials that directly challenged Iran's Shia theocracy. Those demonstrations, which began at the end of 2017, represented the biggest challenge to Iran since 2009 Green Movement protests and set the stage for similar mass unrest in November of last year. The initial spark for the 2017 protest was sudden jump in food prices, but they later morphed into broad demonstrations against the nation's ruling class. Media watchdog Reporters Without Borders denounced Zam's execution. Quote, RSF is outraged at this new crime of Iranian justice. The organization tweeted, adding it had warned United Nations Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet in October that the death sentence was likely. France previously criticized his death sentence as a, quote, a serious blow to the freedom of expression and press freedom in Iran, end quote. Now, as like Beijing, Tehran's regime is also tyrannical. If the regime can't take criticism from a blogger, then I believe their regime is far weaker than they let out to be. And just like China, I believe we must also expose the depth of the corruption of this theocratic tyranny. Moving on, a poem recited by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Azerbaijan has kicked off a row between his home country and Iran, which has accused Ankara of undermining its territorial integrity. Quote, we condemn the aggressive remarks targeting our president and our country on the pretext of a poem, end quote, Erdogan's communications director Ferhattin Altun said in a response on Saturday. Now, in a statement on the presidential website, Altun claimed that Iranian authorities had attempted to quote-unquote distort the context of the verse. On Thursday, Erdogan recited the poem in the Azerbaijani capital Baku about the division of territories predominantly inhabited by Azeris between Iran and Russia in the 19th century. Now, in a statement on the presidential website, Altun claimed that Iranian authorities had attempted to distort the context of the verse. Now, Iran is home to two regions that share that name, West and East Azerbaijan, together with province of Ardabil. The area is home to more than 11 million ethnic Azeris. Iran's territorial integrity was by no means referred to in the poem, Erdogan's aide Altun said, calling on Tehran to avoid any rhetoric that could quote overshadow our bilateral ties. Iran, quote, should not forget, end quote, that Turkey stood by it through hard times and international pressure, Altun said, without citing any specific incident. Now, Turkey has been a vocal critic of US sanctions on Iran, mainly aimed at limiting Tehran's nuclear program. One thing is clear from all this, that the relations between Ankara and Tehran is a very weak one, and that I believe one I believe that both countries are using each other as a tool to reach their own goal vis-a-vis other countries. So in the case of Turkey, I believe they're using Iran in its relation to Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I believe Iran is using Turkey as a way to show Saudi Arabia that they can build a counter alliance. My gut tells me that Ankara is probably going to run Tehran under the bus before Tehran and will use it as a bargaining chip to solidify its future relations with Saudi Arabia and various other Arab countries in order to drop its relation with Tehran. But I guess only time will tell if my gut feeling is right. And finally, moving into Ethiopia. The first non-governmental aid convoy since fighting started to arrive in the capital of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region on Saturday as the government ordered businesses to reopen and officials to return to work. Now, the tempo of the fighting seems to have slowed since the government announced the capture of the regional capital Mekelle late last month, although information is hard to verify due to the restriction. Phone and internet connections are gradually being restored, but most of the regions remain unreachable for journalists and outside aid agencies. The convoy of 7 white trucks that arrived in Mekelle was organized by the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Ethiopian Red Cross, the ICRC said. The government said it has defeated TPLF forces and struck a deal with the United Nations to allow aid. But some aid agencies and donors say the agreement is too restrictive and security remains a problem. One UN security team was shot at last weekend. The government says Tigray is returning to normal despite the continuing restrictions. The federally appointed Provisional Administration for Tigray, intended to replace the TPLF, said it would take office on Sunday and urged local government workers to resume their jobs on Monday. Government workers who were absent would be fired, he said, and gun owners must surrender their weapons to security forces by Tuesday. Now, it's unclear what will happen to civilians displaced by the fighting. Nearly 50,000 refugees, mostly Tigrayans, have crossed into eastern Sudan since early November. Nearly 15,000 are at Rakoba camp, where long lines of people waited for food with plates in their hands, and new arrivals constructed shelters using tree branches. Anyhow, one order that I would take exception to is the handing in over their guns. I would not. I would have urged the Ethiopian government to not issue that order. I believe the people should have the right to own guns, especially at this moment, because full order has not been restored, and until then, by good people need to have guns to protect themselves, especially in the kind of environment they're in. But anyway, on the other side, it is good to know that Ethiopia is slowly resuming normal life, and hopefully soon the whole region broadly can move on the path to peace and prosperity. Well, that's it for this video. If you liked the video, then hit that like button and hit that subscribe button for future updates. And the links to the video are in the description box below. And I will see you in the next video.